Talk about for a second the dollar and put this in context for us, because we've obviously seen some distortions, a little bit of a dollar strength that probably has less to do with people betting on the U.S. and more to do with a lot of other funding issues going on around the globe. Do we start to see a little bit more balance in the FX market between the U.S. dollar and the rest of the world, or are we just going to have to get comfortable with this idea of outperformance of the dollar?
Well, I think you saw the very typical response of FX markets to a crisis like this. Demand for dollars increased very significantly. The dollar is still the most important currency in global transactions and in reserves. There was a shortage of dollars in the system. Companies were drawing credit lines. And so that pushed up the dollar, which is the usual move you get in a crisis like this. However, in the meantime, I think we've seen very important responses from the Fed and other central banks. So as you know, the Fed reactivated many of those FX swap lines that they introduced in the last crisis in 2008, 2009. So those were reactivated, which means that the central banks, who are the counterparties, can offer dollars in their domestic markets to their financial institutions. And then the latest step yesterday, or actually 2 days ago, was that the Fed is now allowing foreign central banks that hold treasuries with the New York Fed to repo those and obtain dollars. So basically the Fed is opening up the floodgates, is giving the global markets, global financial institutions and corporates the dollars that they need. And I think that probably means that we are at, or at least close to, the peak for the US dollar. We've seen some currencies depreciating very rapidly, very far, particularly in emerging markets, and we may now have seen the worst of those depreciations. And my expectation would be that the dollar will not appreciate further, but will rather, start to depreciate.